Okay, so we're now going to talk about Jose Mourinho. He's back at Stamford Bridge on Tuesday as the new Benfica coach. And with us, we've got not Portuguese, but Portuguese-based journalist Tom Kundert from Portugal.net. Tom, you've worked around Mourinho for many years now. So just tell us about the impact of his return to Benfica. It kind of caught us all by a little bit by surprise.
Yeah, well, it's made a huge impact here in Portugal, as you can imagine. Everyone's really excited. I think it's really good for Portuguese football. It puts a lot more eyes on Portuguese football. I think it's really good for Mourinho as well. It's giving him chance to be at a club which is in the Champions League, to be at a club which can fight for win the league realistically. Whether or not it's good for Benfica, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's just he was announced a couple of weeks ago, and really every day has just been dominating the sports papers pretty much ever since then.
So just talk us through. I mean, Jose's backstory. We all know the real backstory of Chelsea, Real Madrid, Inter Milan. But prior to being at Porto, he had a very brief spell at Benfica in the first place, and I guess the manner of his kind of departure from Benfica led him to Porto and the start of the story. So what happened at the first time around at Benfica?
Yeah, so that was actually his first job. As of course everyone knows, he started off as the assistant to Bobby Robson, and then his first job as a head coach was at Benfica. He did quite well there. They were in a real dip. They had a terrible time for years really before he went there. He seemed to be turning it round, but he only ended up having 10 games because they were in the middle of their presidential elections, or they were just coming up to their presidential elections. And that 10th game he had was actually probably his best game. They beat Sporting 3-0. And apparently he went into the presidential candidate and insisted that he give him an improved contract or a longer contract. That didn't come to pass. The next president who was elected decided to go with someone else. And so that was the end of Jose Mourinho at Benfica, kind of really brief tenure, but fairly successful, but nothing too spectacular. And then you're right. Yeah, he went off to União de Leiria, smaller club in Portugal. That's when he first really started showing he was quite something special. He did amazing work there. A very small club, really modest club, got them to their highest finish, fourth and fifth in 2 seasons running. Porto came in for him, and yeah, the rest was history. The best 2 seasons in Porto's history, without a doubt, winning the UEFA Cup, winning the Champions League, absolutely cleaning up in Portugal. Every single trophy they won of the 6 trophies, apart from one cup final against Benfica, curiously. And then, of course, went to Chelsea, all the success there, went to Inter Milan, all the success there. I think you have to say in that period, 5, 6, 7-year period, he was without doubt the best manager in the world. And so obviously made everyone here in Portugal very proud. His career since then, of course, everyone's followed it closely just because of the character he is, as well as his achievements. And so, yeah, when he came back to Portugal, yeah, just everyone was, really excited, big name back in the league. Let's see what he can do.
Tom, can I just ask that, obviously you mentioned there about the heights that he hit as a manager, that the as a general view now of him being something of a bit of a fading force, I suppose, particularly with the jobs that he's had to take. Is that shared in Portugal? I know that he's still got that star quality because of his name, but in terms of his ability as a coach, is he still as revered as he always was in Portugal?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, people here in Portugal, people are very knowledgeable about foreign football, and especially there's so many Portuguese footballers and managers abroad, and so they keep close track on their careers. And yeah, you just look at his record, and you're absolutely right. There seemed to be a fading force, and even the teams his managers, isn't it? You can say is slightly going down the rung of the ladder. It seems to be every single time. And so, yeah, like I say, I think this is a perfect job for Jose Mourinho. It's interesting. In his press conference, his unveiling press conference, he said he was quite disparaging actually to in relation to Fenerbahce, and he was saying he's back at a club where he belongs. He belongs to be at one of the biggest clubs in the world, and he's back at he's now in Benfica. That's where he is. Of course, those are the kind of words which immediately were kind of lapped up by Benfica fans. They like to hear those kind of that kind of praise. So but on the other hand, it's Portuguese football, so it's not one of the major leagues in Europe. So a lot of people here are saying perhaps it's his last chance for redemption, or maybe redemption's not a bit too harsh. His last chance to really show that he can be a top manager among the European elite. If he does something spectacular in Europe, and if he, leads Benfica back to the league. They've only won the league once in the last 4 years. They're in a little bit of a state. So he can kind of, get his reputation back to a much higher point, I think, if it's a success here.
Tom, you talk about his reputation. Without giving away trade secrets, we're recording this on a Monday morning, and Benfica are training later today, and I know, or tomorrow rather, and I noticed that they have opened up their session entirely, which is something that a lot of clubs don't do. It's very, very rare. Normally they train for 15 minutes with the cameras and then they kick everyone out. How much of an opportunity do you think Mourinho sees this game against Chelsea to sort of put himself back in the spotlight, particularly in England, where obviously he has such a strong affinity?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's, one of the, that's one of the reasons he took the job immediately, when it was offered to him, because he's going to be in a Champions League and, such a high profile game this, because of course he's going back to Chelsea. And, he, like he said, Mourinho, his kind of star has faded a little bit, but he's lost none of his self-confidence. In that unveiling press conference, he said, I'm back where I should be, at the top of the game in Europe, or at the top of the kind of football agenda. I think he just loves the fact that people are talking about him again. And so, he obviously is somebody who, has reached the very top, is used to having people talk about him, having thousands of column inches spoken about him, analysing him in every detail. And that's where he feels comfortable. And he's very happy that he's got the opportunity to, be that again to some extent, certainly.
So, Tom, he's only been in the job, 2 weeks? And I'm going to ask you about his next job now, which is classic Mourinho, I guess. But he's always spoken about wanting to get back in the Premier League. Now, he may see this as an opportunity to do that, but obviously there's also talk prior to the Nations League that had Roberto Martinez not won that competition, that Jose would have replaced him. So, first of all, was that correct, do you think? And do you think he's eyeing up the job of being Portugal coach for the World Cup in 2030, which will obviously be co-hosted by Portugal?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's made no secret that that's his ambition. That's one of his ambitions. He wants to be the Portugal national team coach. And you're absolutely right. I think if Portugal had not won that the Nations League, I think there was a very good chance that he would be the Portugal manager right at this moment. He has been offered the job once or twice, most recently when he was at Roma. And after Fernando Santos was dismissed and before Roberto Martinez was hired, Mourinho was the Portuguese Football Federation's first choice. But at that time, he'd just won the Conference League at Roma. He looked like he was on a bit of a high there, and he said it wasn't the right time. He subsequently said about a year later or something that was a mistake on his part. He really should have taken the Portugal job at that moment. But yeah, it's definitely on his agenda without a doubt. And to be honest, I think it doesn't matter how well or how badly things go for him at Benfica. I think that job will be waiting for him. Just the sheer weight of his achievements and his name in football and what he's done for Portuguese football, really, in terms of raising its profile. People here in Portugal are very grateful for him, and there's no doubt about it. He will be Portugal manager one day.
Tom, we can't have you on without asking an obvious question about other Portuguese coaches in the headlines right now. I know you watched Ruben Amorim's rise at Sporting quite closely, and you think that United should give him time and just ride out the storm right now because he has got a lot of potential to be a great coach.
Yeah, I'm probably the only person in the football world who still believes that he can turn it around. It's absolutely impossible to underestimate what he did at in Portugal and at Sporting. Absolutely incredible. I mean, Sporting had won 2 championships in 40 years before he went there. They were a completely dysfunctional club. You know, if you think Manchester United are dysfunctional now, you know, Sporting were in a even bigger mess. And he came in, he turned it round. I think what really impressed people is the way he, curiously, you know, he's been accused of being inflexible, but he was quite flexible at Sporting, and he just got better year on year. Sporting got better and better. You know, he got them really to the top. They absolutely dominated Portuguese football, won 2 out of 4 leagues when he was there. It would have been 3 out of 5. There's no doubt. Or they ended up winning that, you know, the league last season. So you can really say Amorim won 3 out of 5 leagues in Portuguese football for Sporting, which is incredible after Benfica and Porto were just so far ahead. But he's such a smart guy. He's such a smart coach. And I think everywhere he's been, especially at Sporting, but even before in his brief spells at Braga and at Casapia, everyone talks about the way he manages to forge a kind of really strong team spirit. I think that's a bigger asset that he has, even forgetting about the whole tactical side. And I think he can do that at Manchester United. It's like I was just saying earlier, you know, how long was it before Alex Ferguson won his first trophy at Manchester United? You know, 3 years. You know, you have to give him time, I think. And if he is given time, I'm still confident that he can turn it around, because all his good qualities as a coach in Portugal, they're definitely transferable to England.
So just while we're on Mourinho, just to go back to it, what kind of reception, James, do you think Jose is going to get at Chelsea? I mean, I've been at United games in the past where he was manager, and he got absolute pelters from the stands, and obviously since then he's gone and taken the Spurs job as well. I mean, what kind of reaction are you expecting when he makes his comeback?
Well, I mean, he's obviously been back before, and this will be the first time I think he's been back as an ex-Tottenham manager, which probably won't help his cause. I mean, it will be mixed at best for him. He's been abused at Stamford Bridge in the past, and he's commented on that, reminding them of the titles that he's won there and the success that he gave them. And perhaps for some of the younger Chelsea fans who probably don't maybe remember with such clarity the absolute transformational effect he had, obviously, when the Roman Abramovich era started and the success that he delivered. So yeah, you know, it kind of feeds into the debate we're talking about him in general. Is, you know, he's gone from being that really feared, respected figure to almost a pantomime villain, and I think the Chelsea fans will treat him accordingly.
So can we all have our favourite Jose memories? I'll start with you, Tom. Obviously, you've seen it right from the start. So what's your standout Mourinho memory?
My standout Mourinho memory? Oh, there's so many of them, isn't there? But I suppose I still think it's interesting. If you asked him, he's said a few times, apart from that kind of, I think it's a little bit of a throwaway line when he said his greatest achievement was taking United to second. I think his greatest achievement is still what he did at Porto. You know, you really cannot underestimate a Portuguese side just dominating in Europe, becoming the best in the world. So I think my favourite Mourinho moment was really the key moment where he announced himself on World Football, which was, of course, the 2-1 victory at Manchester United in, I think it was the last 16 tie or quarterfinals maybe, in the Champions League in 2004. And when Costinha scored that goal and he just did that famous sprint down the touchline, that kind of announcing himself as a superstar manager. And yeah, I think that's the iconic moment that I most like about Mourinho.
James, don't have to be a good one, it can be a bad one, because I know you had him at Chelsea as well. So.
Oh, good. Well, do you know what? I'm going to pick the one where he had that shoving match with Arsene Wenger on the touchline at Stamford Bridge, just because and actually around that time, just the specialist in failure comments, and he was the only manager I've really properly seen, I suppose you could argue Fergie, but the only manager who really got under Arsene Wenger's skin almost every week. And I always remember when the Arsene Wenger press conferences, the way they'd set them up is they'd have like a table with a piece of cloth over it that would sort of fall over the front, and it was loose. And whenever Wenger got agitated, he'd move it, he'd shuffle his feet around, and you'd see the cloth moving. And as soon as anyone mentioned Jose Mourinho's name in a press conference, suddenly the feet were twitching. You could see his body language rile up. And it all came sort of out in that one moment at Stamford Bridge when, of course, he walked across from one dugout to the other and shoved Mourinho. And it was just an incredible sort of piece of theatre to be able to be privileged enough to sit sort of 10, 12 rows behind it as you do at Stamford Bridge, to just watch that and just see that. It was just a remarkable thing.
Go on, Rob.
Yeah, mine's a bit of an odd one, to be honest. It was at an FWA dinner. There was at a hotel in London, and it was a couple of months after Jose had left or had been sacked by Man United. There was absolutely no reason for Jose to be in that hotel. He has a house down the road, but he was sat in the lobby eating a club sandwich and having a Coke. And a couple of us had spotted Jose, and we kind of went over because we hadn't seen him since he'd been sacked. And just to say, thanks for dealing with us, and we appreciate and good luck for the future. And he insisted that me and this other reporter sat down, and for about 15 to 20 minutes, he absolutely monstered United all over the place about why it had gone wrong, why it wasn't his fault, the signings he didn't get, the players he didn't get out. And it was typical Mourinho. I like to think that he was in that lobby simply because he knew that it was going to be full of a load of journalists, and that it was his way of kind of getting his point across, because the whole kind of narrative had been that he had lost the dressing room and results hadn't been good enough, and it was all his fault and he'd had to go. And I like to think that he kind of planned the whole thing, not for us to, but for any journalist to come and sit with him and just to kind of get his point across. And it was very kind of Mourinho, very kind of cloak and dagger and in the shadows. But I thought he was brilliant for 15 minutes and kind of got his point across and just explained why none of it was his fault.
That's absolutely why he was there. That's 100% why he was there. Listen, I mean, I'm going to end it with some positive stuff on Mourinho, because, listen, we've all been there when he's been horrible and he's been negative, and the atmosphere around clubs has been, toxic at times, certainly United towards the end. But I just can't forget what he was like when he came over to Chelsea, between 2004 and 2007. They were so far ahead. They absolutely terrified Felix Ferguson and Man United. That team he had, it often gets overlooked at Chelsea, that how great that team was, how strong it was. Petr Cech, Carvalho, John Terry, Didier Drogba, Robben, Duff, the great midfield, Essien and Makelele. They were such a great team. And Mourinho raised the bar to a different level. He brought this new sense of charisma to the Premier League. And he really was the special one, wasn't he? For 2-3 years, he was the special one before he became the nasty one. But he really did change the game. And, for me, Mourinho is an absolute icon of the game, good and bad. But, we're glad he's back at Chelsea on Tuesday. I'm sure it'll be a great occasion. And Tom, thanks for your time. Thanks for your thoughts on Mourinho and Ruben Amorim.